They improvised from there. Caleb kept shouting, creating dissonance while Liara threw anything she could reach: stones, tools, chunks of wood. Her aim never wavered despite her injuries. Each throw found its mark, not to kill but to disorient. The Night Stalkers recoiled from the assault, confused by the barrage of noise and impacts. They were used to silent prey that ran or fought with tooth and claw. This tactic was unfamiliar. The creatures backed away, melting into the tree line. Their amber eyes still glowed from the darkness, but the immediate threat had passed. For now, they would wait, patient, until silence returned or desperation forced their prey into the open. Caleb leaned against the barn wall, breathing hard. His throat felt raw from screaming. Liara slumped back into the hay, her energy spent. They'd survived through cooperation, not force. His technology and her knowledge had combined into something neither could have managed alone. The experience proved two species could work together when survival demanded it. Human ingenuity paired with Niavi wilderness knowledge created options where none existed. They'd turned weakness into advantage using only what was at hand. The Night Stalkers still waited out there, but now they faced a different kind of prey, one that fought with intelligence instead of instinct. Caleb worked quickly, pouring antiseptic from the med kit over the puncture wounds. The liquid spread across her blue skin, clearing away some of the blood. That's when he saw it happening. The edges of the wounds weren't bleeding freely anymore. Instead, the blue blood thickened where it met the air, forming a dark crust that looked almost like scales. It happened fast. Within seconds, the flow reduced to a slow seep. Liara watched him work, her breathing steady despite the pain. "Our blood hardens," she explained. Her voice remained calm, instructional. "It's a defense. Seals wounds quickly against toxins in the air, in the soil." She gestured toward the forming crust. Normally, it would have closed these wounds already. But the crochet spears carried something different. Their poison worked against the Niavi biology, stopping the natural clotting process from completing its work. The scaled crust had formed, but beneath it, the poison still circulated. Her body was fighting it, but not winning. The defense mechanism that made her people resilient had met its match. Caleb's human supplies seemed primitive next to this advanced biology. Antiseptic, bandages, basic painkillers. They were tools for a species that bled red and stayed vulnerable. The Niavi bodies neutralized most natural toxins on their own. Their blood could filter poisons that would kill a human within minutes. But the crochet had developed something specifically to counter that advantage. He continued cleaning the area around the wounds. The antiseptic seemed almost unnecessary given her natural defenses, but he applied it anyway. Standard procedure for puncture wounds: prevent infection, support the body's healing. Except her body healed differently than any humans ever could. Liara watched his hands work. She didn't criticize the simplicity of his methods. Instead, she seemed to appreciate the care behind them. The intention mattered as much as the technology. Her people might have more advanced biological defenses, but they still understood the value of assistance, of not facing threats alone. Their differences became points of fascination rather than fear. Caleb found himself noting details: how the blue blood darkened as it oxidized, how the scaled crust felt slightly warm to the touch, how her skin temperature ran cooler than human normal. These weren't alarming discoveries. They were just facts, data points about someone who was fundamentally different, yet fundamentally similar in needing help. His practical knowledge found unexpected value here. While her body fought the poison internally, his external care might make the difference, keeping the wound clean, monitoring for changes, providing basic support. These human practices complemented her alien biology. Neither approach was superior alone, but together they created a better chance. The Niavi resilience paired with human medical knowledge formed a combination neither culture had anticipated. Their cooperation at the biological level mirrored their cooperation against the Night Stalkers, different strengths creating new solutions. Where human medicine might fail against alien biology, and Niavi defenses might fail against specialized poison, together they covered more ground. Caleb finished applying a clean bandage over the partially sealed wounds. The blue crust had stopped the bleeding, but the real battle happened inside her bloodstream. Her body continued working against the poison, slowly neutralizing what it could. The human antiseptic might help prevent secondary infection, while her biology handled the primary threat. Two different approaches to the same problem. Working in parallel rather than opposition, Caleb unrolled the foil blanket from his emergency kit. It was standard issue from the crash supplies, thin metallic material that reflected body heat. He wrapped it around Liara's shoulders, careful not to disturb her wounds. She flinched at first contact with the strange material, then stilled as warmth spread through the crinkling surface. Her blue eyes widened. She ran her fingers over the foil, feeling its texture. "It holds heat without fire," she said, her voice filled with something like wonder. Such simple technology didn't exist in her culture. The Na'vi used animal pelts, woven grasses, sometimes heated stones wrapped in leather. Nothing like this lightweight material that trapped warmth so efficiently. She turned the edges of the blanket in her hands, examining how it folded, how it reflected the dim light. The crinkling sound seemed to fascinate her, a sharp metallic rustle unlike any natural material she knew. Her people's technology leaned toward biological integration, natural materials enhanced through generations of knowledge. This human invention was something else entirely, manufactured, artificial, yet incredibly effective. This small object became their first real bridge between worlds. It represented human ingenuity born from desperation, the need to survive with limited resources on an alien world. For Liara, it symbolized something more profound, compassion from an unexpected source. The settlers were supposed to be enemies, dangerous intruders hiding behind walls. Yet here was one of them giving her warmth, care, something her own people would offer a wounded clan member. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The gesture seemed to mean as much as the physical warmth. Someone had chosen to help when they could have walked away. Someone had risked their own safety to provide comfort. In Na'vi culture, such actions carried weight beyond the immediate moment. They spoke to character, to honor, to the core of what made a person trustworthy. The blanket's simplicity held its own kind of power. Advanced technology wasn't always better. Sometimes the most effective solutions were the most straightforward. Human survival gear, designed for efficiency and portability, achieved what Na'vi methods required more effort to accomplish. Both approaches had value, but in this moment, the simple foil blanket did exactly what was needed without complication. Liara's shivering eased as the material retained her body heat. The poison still worked through her system, but at least she wasn't fighting cold too. She looked from the blanket to Caleb's face, then back to the blanket. The connection was clear in her expression. This object linked them now, a tangible representation of their unlikely alliance. The crinkling sound continued to draw her attention. She flexed the material gently, listening to the noise it made. Something about it seemed almost magical to her ears. A manufactured sound from a manufactured object, both utterly foreign and deeply comforting. It was the sound of someone helping when they didn't have to, the sound of compassion overriding fear. In the end, the technology mattered less than the intention behind it. The gesture of warmth carried more weight than the blanket's reflective properties. That simple act of wrapping someone in a thermal blanket became a turning point, not because of what the object could do, but because of what giving it represented. One person seeing another in need and choosing to help despite all the reasons not to. The foil would eventually lose its novelty, but the memory of that moment wouldn't. A human giving warmth to a Na'vi, an enemy becoming an ally. Sometimes the smallest objects carry the largest meanings. Sometimes the simplest solutions work best because they come from the right place. Liara's fever spiked. The cleaned wounds and thermal blanket weren't enough. Her skin burned hot under Caleb's hand, her breathing turning shallow. The poison was working deeper than either of them had expected. She struggled to focus, but her voice held certainty. Silver-veined leaves. Purple berries. Grows near water. She described the plant in short-pained sentences. It was the only thing that would break the fever now. The perimeter alarm blared just after dusk. Caleb Mercer tightened his grip on the rifle, scanning the blue-tinged forest. Something moved out there, something that shouldn't be there. Council rules said shoot first, ask questions never. But when he saw the figure stumble into the clearing, bleeding azure blood, every instinct told him this was different. The ship came down hard. It wasn't supposed to break orbit over Nova, but atmospheric turbulence caught the stabilizers wrong. 200 colonists meant for a 6-month survey mission found themselves welded to this world. Their supplies were meant for temporary habitat, not permanent survival. They salvaged what they could from the twisted metal. Medical supplies, food synthesizers, construction tools, anything that might keep them alive. The colony ship's wreckage became their only source of materials. Everything else was alien, untested, potentially hostile. A council formed within days. Former officers, scientists, engineers, anyone with leadership experience. Their first priority was order. Their first rule was absolute: no contact with indigenous cultures. The perimeter fence went up, powered by salvaged generators. Motion sensors scanned the tree line day and night. The policy seemed sound on paper. Unknown cultures meant unknown risks, but fear grew on both sides of that fence. The settlers watched shadows move in the blue-tinged woods. The natives watched lights flicker behind the human barrier. Neither side understood the other's intentions. Survival meant following orders without question. Sentries stood watch with rifles charged. Farmers worked fields within sight of armed guards. Children learned to run for shelter at the first alarm. Every decision was weighed against the risk of attracting attention. They learned to fear the woods after dusk. Strange calls echoed through the twilight, high melodic tones that didn't match any earth creature. The settlers secured their livestock behind reinforced pens. They checked fence voltages 3 times nightly. Watch shifts doubled when the twin moons rose. The forest seemed to watch back. Sometimes movement flickered between trees, something tall, something blue-skinned. No attacks came, but the tension never eased. Every snapped branch, every rustle in the undergrowth put hands on weapons. The council reinforced their isolation policy weekly. No excursions beyond the fence without armed escort. No attempts at communication. No accepting gifts or offerings if any appeared. Their survival depended on maintaining distance, but distance bred speculation. Stories circulated about the natives, their strength, their weapons, their strange biology. Some claimed they could blend with the foliage. Others said they moved without sound. Fear filled the spaces where knowledge should have been. By the time Caleb Mercer took his watch rotation, the routine was set. Check the perimeter sensors. Monitor the tree line. Shoot anything that breached the fence. The rules were clear, simple, absolute. They had to be. One mistake could doom them all. The Niavi weren't the only hunters in those blue forests. Beyond their territory lived the Kroshi, who fought with poison-tipped spears and moved like shadows. 2 cultures sharing one world, divided by completely different codes of honor. Where the Niavi valued face-to-face combat and ancestral traditions, the Kroshi believed victory justified any method. The Niavi measured strength through physical prowess and loyalty to clan. Their warriors trained from childhood with traditional weapons, bladed staffs, throwing discs, energy bows crafted from native materials. They wore their azure skin as a badge of pride, markings indicating family lineage and combat achievements. Every action was weighed against ancestral teachings. They viewed the human settlers with deep suspicion. The perimeter fence represented cowardice, hiding behind barriers instead of facing challenges directly. Their technology seemed like cheating to warriors who valued personal skill. The humans' reliance on rifles and sensors suggested weakness rather than intelligence. The Kroshi operated differently. They used neurotoxins extracted from forest plants, coating their spear tips with substances that could paralyze prey within minutes. They struck from concealment, preferring ambush tactics to honorable confrontation. Their culture valued results over ceremony, survival over tradition. Between these opposing forces stood the sire, rarely seen but deeply respected by both tribes. They served as mediators and historians, keeping the ancient balances. Their presence usually meant serious disputes required resolution. Most settlers never saw one, though scouts sometimes reported tall figures observing from distant ridges. This cultural divide made every interaction dangerous. A Niavi warrior would announce challenge with a formal cry. A Kroshi hunter would strike without warning. Humans had no framework to understand either approach. A defensive posture might be read as aggression. A peaceful gesture might be interpreted as weakness. The settlers' technology created particular problems. Night vision scopes seemed like unnatural advantage. Communication devices suggested deception. Even their medical equipment appeared suspicious to cultures that used herbal remedies and ritual healing. Every technological solution widened the misunderstanding gap. Niavi scouts monitored the settlement from tree lines, reporting back about human routines. They noted sentry rotations, harvest times when children played near the perimeter. They saw patterns but understood little of the meaning behind them. The humans remained mysterious, unpredictable. The Croshi watched too, but with different intentions. They noted weak points in defenses, storage locations when livestock were moved. They calculated risk versus reward, waiting for opportunities. Their interest was purely practical, without the Nyavi's philosophical concerns. This three-way standoff created constant tension. A Nyavi hunting party might clash with Croshi raiders near the perimeter. Humans would hear the conflict but understand none of the context. Shouts in alien languages, strange weapon sounds, then silence. Each incident reinforced the need for isolation. The settlers developed theories about forest politics but lacked real knowledge. Some thought the Nyavi and Croshi were rival clans. Others believed they served different gods or fought over territory. Without communication, speculation filled the gaps. Fear grew where understanding should have been. One wrong move could trigger catastrophe. A Nyavi warrior killed by a Croshi trap near the fence might be blamed on humans. A Croshi raider shot by sentries could bring retaliation from his tribe. The sire might intervene if balances shifted too far. Every day carried risk of sparking a war nobody could win. Caleb Mercer knew that sound. It cut through the night air like a knife, the perimeter alarm screaming its warning. He'd stood watch most nights for months, rifle resting in his hands, eyes scanning the tree line where shadows shifted in the blue moonlight. Nothing moved out there after full dark. Nothing friendly anyway. His father's voice rose above the alarm. "Secure the livestock!" Full lockdown now. The words were sharp, rehearsed. Farmers moved quickly, herding the last of the wool beasts into reinforced pens. Their frightened lowing mingled with the alarm's shrill cry. Children were already inside the barrier walls, doors sealed tight. Council rules were absolute. Anything that crossed the perimeter got shot. No questions, no warnings. The settlers had learned that lesson the hard way when a six-legged predator got inside and killed 3 people before they brought it down. Fear had written that rule in blood and steel, but the figure that stumbled into the clearing wasn't attacking. It moved with a ragged, pained gait, one arm pressed tight against its side. It didn't charge the fence or raise a weapon. It just kept stumbling forward, leaving dark drops on the packed earth. Azure drops. Caleb's finger rested against the trigger. Training said squeeze now. The target was inside the perimeter. The rules were clear, but his eyes registered details the rules didn't cover, the way the figure swayed on its feet, the way it left a trail of blue blood like spilled ink, the way it moved like a wounded animal, not a hunter. His father shouted again. "Caleb, fire if it gets closer!" The command hung in the air between them. He could see the shape clearer now, tall, slender, definitely Nyavi. Blue skin showed through torn clothing. This was exactly what the council feared. Exactly what the rules were made for. But the figure collapsed 20 yards from the fence, not even trying to rise. It just lay there, breathing hard, one hand still pressed to its side. Caleb's thumb moved the safety back on. The rifle lowered. He found himself walking forward across the cleared ground toward the fallen shape. His father's voice turned sharp. "What are you doing? Get back to the line." But Caleb kept walking. The rule said shoot. The rules said protect the settlement at all costs. But the rules didn't account for this, for someone who was clearly hurt, clearly alone, clearly no threat to anyone. He stopped a few feet away. The Nyavi stirred, tried to push up on one elbow, failed. Blue eyes met his. There was no anger there, no hostility, just pain and something else, maybe surprise, maybe hope. Caleb made his choice. He slung the rifle over his shoulder and took another step forward. The alarm kept blaring. His father kept shouting. But in that moment, none of that mattered. This wasn't a threat. This was someone who needed help. His refusal to fire became his first real decision as something more than just a settler following orders. She pushed herself up on one elbow, her hand still pressed tight against her side. The words came out strained, the accent unfamiliar, but the meaning cut through everything else. "Stay back," she warned. Her voice held a musical quality even through the pain, like wind through forest branches. Blue blood seeped between her fingers, dark and thick against azure skin. This was one of the Nyavi, the people they'd been taught to fear, to shoot on sight. Everything in his training said retreat, raise the rifle, follow protocol. But then she spoke again. "Do not come closer." The syllables were shaped wrong, the rhythm off, but the language was unmistakably English. That shouldn't be possible. The settlers had no contact with native cultures. No exchanges, no shared language. Yet here she was, bleeding in the dirt, speaking words she shouldn't know. Caleb's grip on his rifle loosened. The council's warnings about savage hunters didn't match the reality before him. He took a slow step forward, hands open at his sides. "You're hurt." Her eyes tracked his movement, wary but not aggressive. He saw the wounds clearly now. 2 punctures in her side, spaced like spear tips. Not laser burns, not projectile wounds. These were traditional weapons, the kind the Croce used. The story said they poisoned their tips with neurotoxins. If that was true, she didn't have much time. This changed everything. She wasn't a threat to the settlement. She was someone else's victim. Maybe even someone the humans shared a common enemy with. The Niavi had always been painted as the primary danger. But what if they were just another group trying to survive? What if the real predators were the ones who struck from shadows with poisoned weapons? Her breathing came in shallow gasps. The blue blood had already started thickening at the edges of the wounds, forming a strange crust. Some kind of natural clotting mechanism, maybe. But it wasn't stopping the flow completely. She needed proper medical attention, not whatever primitive measures her people might use. Caleb made his decision. He knelt carefully, keeping enough distance to not seem threatening. "I want to help." The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. She studied his face, her blue eyes sharp with pain but clear with intelligence. She was evaluating him just as he was evaluating her, weighing risk against need. He saw past the alien skin color, the strange biology, the cultural divide. Underneath it all was just a person in trouble. Someone who'd been running, fighting, probably scared. Someone who knew enough of his language to warn him away instead of attacking. That said more about her character than any council briefing ever could. The alarm still blared in the background. Shouts echoed from the settlement perimeter. They would be coming to investigate soon. If they found her here, they'd shoot first and never ask questions. He had to move quickly, get her somewhere sheltered before the security team arrived, somewhere he could properly assess those wounds, see if human medicine could help where native biology was failing. His father's voice cut through the noise again. Closer now. "Caleb, report." Time was up. He reached out slowly, offering a hand. Not to touch her, just to show intention. "Can you walk?" Every rule said leave her. Council law was clear. Contact with locals meant exile. Worse if you helped one. They'd made examples of settlers who broke that rule before. One man got banished for trading spare parts for fresh fruit. Another family got confined to quarters for 6 months after their child waved at a Na'vi scout. The punishment would be severe, maybe permanent. Caleb knew the risks better than anyone. He heard his father's boots crunching across the gravel perimeter. Security would be right behind him. They'd shoot first, never ask what happened. The girl tried to push herself up again, failed. Her breathing came in shallow hitches. Blue blood pooled in the dirt beneath her. If he left her, the night predators would find her within the hour. Or the Croce might track her blood trail back to this spot. Either way, she'd be dead by morning. His moral compass swung away from obedience. This wasn't about breaking rules. It was about letting someone die when he could prevent it. The settlers talked about maintaining humanity out here, about keeping their values intact, but those values seemed hollow if they only applied to other humans. He made his choice quickly, without second thoughts. He slid his arm under her shoulders, careful of the wounds. She stiffened at the contact but didn't resist. "I need to get you somewhere safe," he said. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. She nodded once, her blue eyes holding his. Trust or maybe just desperation. He helped her stand, taking most of her weight. She was lighter than he expected, all lean muscle and sharp angles. The barn stood 50 yards away, its doors partly open from the earlier livestock scramble. It offered cover, shadows, relative safety. He half carried, half guided her across the open ground, moving as quickly as her injuries allowed. Every second felt exposed. The alarm had stopped, but voices carried through the night, security teams organizing search patterns. They reached the barn's shadowed interior. He lowered her into a stack of hay near the back wall, away from any windows. The smell of animals and stored grain filled the air. It was warm, sheltered, hidden from both human and Niavi eyes. For now, at least. He closed the main doors quietly, leaving just enough gap to see out. This decision risked everything. His place in the settlement, his family's standing, maybe even his freedom. Helping her made him an outcast twice over, from his own people and potentially from hers if they discovered him with one of their wounded. But looking at her lying there, bleeding and alone, He knew he'd make the same choice again. The barn became their temporary refuge, a neutral ground between two worlds. Hay dust motes floated in the moonlight, filtering through cracks in the walls. Somewhere outside, security teams moved through the settlement, checking buildings, scanning the perimeter. They'd assume whatever triggered the alarm had retreated back into the forest. They wouldn't think to check their own barn for the source. Caleb pulled a med kit from the wall where they kept supplies for treating injured animals. It wasn't much: antiseptics, bandages, basic tools. But it was something. He knelt beside her, opening the kit. Her eyes followed his movements, wary but not afraid. This act of mercy would change everything for both of them. But in that moment, all that mattered was stopping the bleeding. The smell of blood brought them. Night Stalkers moved through the blue foliage without sound, their six-legged gait covering ground faster than any human could run. Their blue-black fur absorbed moonlight, making them nearly invisible in the darkness. Only their amber eyes showed sometimes, twin points of light in the shadows. They were patient hunters, persistent, and they'd tracked the azure blood scent right to the barn. Liara pushed herself up against the hay bales. Her face tightened with pain, but her voice stayed steady. Night Stalkers. They circle when they've found prey. She'd grown up with these predators, knew their patterns from childhood. The settlers had lost people to them before. The creatures would wait for days if necessary, patient as stone. Their options were limited. Caleb's rifle held only 3 charges, not enough for a pack. The barn doors wouldn't hold against determined attack. They needed something else, something that used the hunter's weaknesses against them. Liara's eyes scanned the barn's interior, then fixed on the loose stones near the foundation. They hunt by sound and scent. Too much noise confuses them. It was a desperate plan, but better than waiting. Caleb moved to the door crack, watching shadows shift outside. 3 sets of amber eyes glowed in the darkness, maybe more deeper in the trees. They were already circling, closing the distance. The lead creature lowered its head, sniffing the ground where Liara's blood had fallen. He took a deep breath and screamed. The sound ripped through the night air, raw and unnatural. The Night Stalkers flinched back, their circling broken. For 3 seconds they hesitated, uncertain. That was all the time Liara needed. Her arm snapped forward, a rock flying from her hand with precision that spoke of warrior training. It struck the lead creature square between the eyes. The beast shook its head, snarling. The problem was location. That particular plant grew along stream banks deep in Croce hunting territory. Caleb would have to cross the perimeter after dark, something strictly forbidden by council law. The punishment for night excursions was severe, especially into known hostile areas. But looking at Liara shaking with fever, the rules seemed less important. He waited until the settlement's night watch changed shifts. The sentries focused outward toward the forest, not inward toward their own buildings. He moved from shadow to shadow, keeping low. The perimeter fence hummed with defensive charge. He found the maintenance access point he'd used before, a section temporarily powered down for repairs. Just enough gap to slip through. The forest felt different at night. Sounds carried farther. Shadows moved in ways that didn't match daylight patterns. He remembered Liara's descriptions carefully. Look for running water first. Then find the plants clustered in damp soil, silver veins on broad leaves, dark purple berries that stained the fingers. Croce hunting parties moved through these areas after dark. They used the night cover for ambushes, for tracking prey that thought darkness would protect them. Caleb kept his steps light, his breathing controlled. Every sense strained for warning signs: a snapped twig, displaced foliage, the faint scent of their body paint. They moved like shadows themselves, hard to spot until they were already upon you. He found the stream by sound first, a gentle rushing over stones. Moonlight reflected off the water, creating shifting patterns on the banks. His eyes scanned the vegetation, looking for the distinctive leaves. There, broad green leaves with silver tracing like veins, clusters of dark berries weighing down the stems. Exactly as she'd described. He harvested quickly, stuffing the plants into his pocket. The berries left purple stains on his hands. The leaves gave off a faint medicinal scent. He worked with efficient movements, trying to minimize his time in the open. Each moment here increased the risk of discovery. Something moved upstream. A subtle shifting in the water, not quite natural. Caleb froze, crouching low behind a thick-trunked tree. He watched the water's surface, waiting. After a long moment, a Croce hunter emerged from the water, moving silently toward the opposite bank. The hunter paused, scanning the area, then melted back into the foliage. They'd been close, too close. Caleb waited another full minute before moving again. His heart hammered against his ribs. That had been near, too near. He finished gathering what he needed and retreated the way he'd come, every sense alert for additional threats. Back at the barn, he crushed the berries as Liara had instructed. The paste smelled bitter, pungent. He mixed it with water from his canteen, helping her drink the concoction. She swallowed with difficulty, her skin still burning hot. Within hours, the fever broke. Her breathing eased, the shaking stopped. The Niavi remedy worked where human medicine couldn't. His successful return with the plants proved his commitment went beyond simple kindness. He'd risked everything the settlement stood for to save her. That night journey changed things between them, from cautious allies to something closer. Something built on shared risk and trust. The raiding party came from the western settlement. They weren't Niavi or Kroshi, they were human. Their farms had failed, their supplies dwindled. Desperation made them dangerous in ways the aliens never were. They knew Northridge's layout, its weak points, its routines. They struck at shift change when guards were distracted. They targeted the medical hut first. That's where the real value was. Medicines, surgical tools, advanced supplies salvaged from the crash. Things you couldn't grow or manufacture without proper facilities. The raiders moved with purpose, not random violence. They wanted specific resources and they were willing to kill for them. Sarah, the apprentice medic, got trapped inside when they hit. She'd been doing inventory late, cataloging supplies by lamplight. The raiders sealed the doors from outside, trapping her with their prizes. She barricaded herself in the back storage area, but they were already breaking through. Her comm unit calls went unanswered. Security was busy elsewhere. Liara heard the struggle from the barn. Her hearing picked up details human ears missed. The specific pitch of forced entry, the rhythm of unfamiliar footsteps. She moved before Caleb fully understood what was happening. Her injuries still pained her, but training overrode discomfort. She became a different person, focused, fluid, lethal in her precision. They reached the medical hut as the raiders were breaking down the inner door. 3 men with shock batons and makeshift blades. They moved like scavengers, quickly but without discipline. Liara engaged before they saw her coming. Her first strike disabled the nearest man's weapon arm. The move was too fast to follow. A sharp twist that dropped the baton without breaking bones. Caleb moved to flank them, using the distraction. He'd seen combat simulations, trained with security teams, but never real fighting. This was different. Liara moved like water flowing around obstacles. She blocked strikes without meeting force directly, redirecting momentum against the attackers themselves. Her economy of motion spoke of years of warrior practice. They fought back-to-back in the confined space. Caleb handled the straightforward threats, blocking, shoving, creating openings. Liara dealt the precise disabling strikes. She never aimed to kill, just neutralize. A pressure point strike here, a joint lock there. Her techniques were foreign but brutally effective. The raiders didn't know how to counter her style. Sarah watched from behind overturned shelves, her medical kit held like a weapon. She saw the blue-skinned stranger fighting to protect her. The Council's warnings about Niavi savagery didn't match the controlled defense happening before her. This was skill, not brutality. Strategy, not rage. The last raider went down with a choked gasp, Liara's arm across his throat just long enough to cut oxygen. He slumped unconscious beside his companions. The whole fight lasted less than a minute. Silence returned to the medical hut, broken only by heavy breathing and the smell of overturned antiseptics. Sarah emerged, slowly, her eyes wide. She looked from Caleb to Liara and back again. The lines between friend and foe had blurred beyond recognition. Humans had tried to kill her for supplies. A Niavi had saved her life. The alliance they'd formed in that barn had just proven its value in the most concrete way possible. They secured the unconscious raiders with medical restraints. Their motives became clear from the supplies they'd gathered: antibiotics, painkillers, surgical tools. Things the Western settlement desperately needed but couldn't produce. The conflict wasn't about malice. It was about survival pushing people to terrible choices. Liara checked Caleb for injuries with quick, efficient movements. Her hands were steady, her focus complete. The warrior mask slipped away, replaced by the same person he'd helped in the barn. But now he understood what lay beneath the surface. Capabilities he'd never imagined. Loyalty that went beyond species. Dawn light revealed shapes beyond the perimeter. They stood in perfect formation, 100 Na'vi warriors where none had ever approached. Their azure skin caught the morning sun, weapons held at ready positions. This wasn't a scouting party or hunting group. This was a military deployment. Sentries raised the alarm, voices tight with controlled panic. Every rifle on the perimeter found its way to firing position. At their center stood Taroval in full ceremonial regalia. His armor bore ancestral markings, his staff displayed clan symbols. This was the Na'vi shaman himself, leader of their people. His honor guard flanked him, their movements synchronized, disciplined. Their presence signaled either imminent attack or something the settlers had no framework to understand. Security teams took defensive positions along the fence line. The shaman's gaze swept across the settlement, then fixed on Caleb. He stood apart from the security formation, still holding the medical kit from tending Liara. Taraval's eyes held his for a long moment, measuring, assessing. Then the shaman raised his voice, the words carrying clearly across the cleared ground. An enemy's child in need tests the true warrior's heart. The statement hung in the air, reframing everything that had happened. This wasn't about territory disputes or resource conflicts. The shaman spoke of character, of fundamental values that transcended species boundaries. Caleb's act of mercy, helping a wounded stranger despite the risks, had become a diplomatic incident of the highest order. The Na'vi hadn't come for war. They'd come to acknowledge something their culture valued above nearly everything else: honor demonstrated through action. Kano began moving immediately. His footwork was precise, economical. He tested Caleb's defenses with quick feints, studying his reactions. The warrior's confidence showed in every movement. He expected an easy victory against an untrained opponent. That overconfidence might be his weakness. Caleb held the practice blade awkwardly. He knew basic defensive moves from security training, but nothing like this. His strategy formed quickly. Observe, adapt, use what he knew rather than what he didn't. He'd fought night predators and human raiders. He understood timing and distraction. The first real attack came fast. Kano's blade whistled through the air toward Caleb's shoulder. Caleb blocked clumsily, the impact jarring his arm. The warrior smiled, already preparing his next strike. He moved like water flowing around stones, relentless and smooth. Caleb focused on Kano's injured leg. He noticed the slight favoring of that side, the minute adjustments in weight distribution. He began forcing the warrior to pivot on that leg, to put pressure where it hurt. Simple moves, basic footwork, but applied with purpose. The duel would decide whether peace survived this day. Strategy would matter more than strength here. Caleb's understanding of physics and body mechanics might counter Kano's years of training. He watched for patterns, for repetitions, for the moments when confidence made the warrior predictable. Kano attacked again, a spinning strike aimed at Caleb's midsection. Caleb saw the tell Liara had mentioned, a slight dip of the shoulder before the spin. He moved inside the strike instead of backing away, closing the distance where the staff lost effectiveness. His own practice blade came up fast. Caleb watched Kano move. The warrior's experience showed in every step, every shift of weight. But that same confidence created patterns. He always led with his left foot when feinting. He overextended slightly on thrusts. His right leg, the injured one, gave a tiny hitch when he pivoted counterclockwise. Caleb noted each detail without seeming to study them. He kept his own movements simple, defensive, letting Kano believe he faced an untrained opponent. He relied on timing rather than force. When Kano attacked, Caleb moved just enough to avoid the strike, conserving energy. He used the environment like he would against forest predators, creating small advantages from uneven ground, from shifting light, from the warrior's own momentum. He didn't try to match strength against strength. That would have been suicide. A feint came exactly as Liara had warned, left shoulder dip, then a spinning strike from the right. Caleb saw it developing. Instead of backing away, he stepped inside the rotation. His practice blade came up not to block but to strike at the opening that appeared under Kano's arm. The move was simple, direct, without any traditional technique behind it. The dulled edge caught Kano's side just below the ribcage. It wasn't a deep cut, but it broke the skin. A thin line of azure blood welled up through the torn fabric. The duel ended there. First blood drawn. The rules were clear. Surprise showed on both their faces. Kano hadn't expected the move. He'd anticipated either a block or a dodge, not a counterstrike from such close range. His confidence had made him predictable. Caleb's own surprise came from the realization that it had worked. That simple observation and timing had overcome years of training. Taraval stepped forward immediately. He examined the cut, then raised his staff. First blood to the human. The declaration echoed across the clearing. The Na'vi warriors watched silently, their expressions unreadable. Kano straightened slowly, his pride clearly wounded worse than his side. He bowed acknowledgement to the shaman, but his eyes held frustrated respect when they met Caleb's. Victory came from adaptability, not traditional skill. Caleb had used what he knew, observation, timing, understanding of body mechanics, against an opponent who relied on practiced forms. The outcome changed everything in that moment. A human had won under Na'vi rules using Na'vi weapons against one of their proven warriors. The settlement watched in silent amazement. Security teams lowered their rifles fully now. Council members exchanged looks of dawning understanding. This wasn't just about mercy or honor debts anymore. It was about capability. About a human proving they could operate within alien frameworks when necessary. Kano retrieved his weapon, his movement stiff with more than physical pain. He'd been bested by someone he considered inferior, and the lesson would linger. But he accepted the outcome with a warrior's grace. The traditionalists would have to acknowledge this result, however unwillingly. Caleb stood breathing heavily, the practice blade still in his hand. The blue stone Liara had given him felt warm against his chest. He hadn't needed luck, just good observation and the willingness to use it. The duel had lasted minutes, but its implications would last much longer. Two cultures watched each other across the cleared ground, but the dynamic had shifted. Suspicion began giving way to calculation. Perhaps humans weren't just helpless intruders hiding behind walls. Perhaps they could adapt, learn, even excel in this world when given the chance. The victory opened doors that fear had kept closed. Taraval declared the matter settled with Caleb's victory. The human had earned the respect of the Sire people through combat and compassion. But both cultures now faced the harder task, building trust where none had existed before. Suspicion ran deep on both sides of the perimeter fence. The warriors still watched the settlers with guarded eyes. The settlers still gripped their weapons tightly. Centuries of isolation and fear don't vanish with one duel's outcome. The pact proposed partnerships between hunters and healers. Na'vi trackers would teach human scouts forest signs and predator patterns. Human medics would share knowledge of wound treatment and infection control. Each side brought strengths the other lacked. Together they covered more ground, answered more threats. The agreement recognized that survival often depended on specialized skills, not just brute force. Human defenders learned to recognize Na'vi banners. The cloth standards carried specific patterns indicating clan allegiance and intent. A blue wave pattern meant peaceful passage. A crossed spear design signaled hunting parties. These visual cues prevented misunderstandings at a distance. Sentries no longer assumed every movement in the forest was hostile. They watched for banners first, then decided on threat levels. Peace required restraining darkest instincts on both sides. The human urge to shoot first, ask later. The Na'vi tradition of answering insults with force. Each culture had to hold back their automatic responses. They created clear rules of engagement instead. Challenge patterns, response protocols, escalation procedures. These frameworks replaced fear with structure. The council had questions about this new alliance. Security Chief Fletcher voiced concerns about lowered defenses. Farmers worried about Na'vi hunting near their fields. Parents feared for children playing outside the perimeter. The answers came slowly, through demonstration rather than debate. Na'vi warriors protecting human farmers from Kroshi raids. Human medics healing Na'vi children's injuries. Actions built trust where words couldn't. Incremental steps replaced immediate suspicion. Small exchanges first, plant samples for metal tools, then shared patrols along contested borders. Finally, joint training exercises blending techniques. Each success made the next step easier. Each failure was analyzed without accusation. They learned to fix problems instead of assigning blame. Cooperation became possible where fear ruled before. The perimeter fence remained, but its purpose shifted from barrier to marker. The cleared ground between settlements became meeting space instead of no man's land. Night watch rotations now included Na'vi scouts alongside human sentries. Their different senses covered more threats. The formal recognition changed Northridge's future forever. No longer just struggling survivors behind walls, now part of something larger, something shared. The Alliance offered protection from common enemies, knowledge of the land, trading partners for scarce resources. But it also brought obligations, complexities, new risks to balance. Two cultures began weaving their futures together. The process would take time, patience, continued courage, but the foundation was laid through one act of mercy tested by combat. Now the real work began, building what that moment made possible. Day by day, choice by choice, they would determine whether peace could last. Liara accepted the role of Niavi liaison to the settlement. Her movement within Northridge required careful trust from both sides. Human sentries still watched her with guarded expressions. Niavi traditionalists questioned her closeness to the outsiders. She walked this tightrope with quiet determination, her presence a constant test of the fragile peace. She began teaching sire hunting signals to the settlement children. They gathered in the cleared area near the perimeter fence, human and Niavi youth side by side. Her hands moved through traditional gestures, flicking fingers for danger, flat palms for silence, circling motions for gathering. The children mimicked her movements, their small hands learning the language of the forest. Human and Niavi youth began learning from each other beyond the formal lessons. They exchanged words from both languages, comparing tools, sharing stories about their homes. A human boy showed a Niavi girl how to whittle wood into animal shapes. She showed him how to find edible roots by their leaf patterns. These small exchanges built understanding where suspicion once grew. This cultural exchange reduced the likelihood of renewed hostilities. Children who played together today would lead together tomorrow. They saw allies where their parents saw potential enemies. The shared knowledge created common ground, something to build on when disagreements arose. The future looked different through their eyes, less divided, more connected. Kroshi threats and rogue Niavi factions remained real dangers. Not everyone accepted the alliance. Some Niavi clans still viewed humans as invaders. Kroshi raiders continued testing defenses from the shadows. The peace was fragile, constantly tested by those who preferred conflict. Every day brought new challenges to the agreement, but now they faced these threats with shared protection. Niavi scouts patrolled alongside human sentries. Their different skills complemented each other. Human technology spotting heat signatures, Niavi senses detecting subtle forest disturbances. They covered more ground together, responded faster to incidents. The perimeter became a joint responsibility. The alliance formalized into a durable framework. They established communication protocols, shared territories, mutual defense agreements. Regular meetings between council members and clan leaders addressed concerns before they escalated. The structure provided stability where improvisation had ruled before. Both sides knew what to expect, how to proceed. One injured girl became the bridge that saved two peoples. Liara's presence in the settlement made the abstract agreement personal. She ate with human families, treated their injuries with Niavi remedies, explained their customs without judgment. Her blue skin and strange eyes became familiar, then normal, then valued. She was the living proof that cooperation worked. Her role extended beyond diplomacy. She helped mediate disputes over hunting grounds, arranged trades for scarce resources, translated during tense negotiations. Her understanding of both cultures prevented misunderstandings that might have broken the peace. She became essential to making the alliance function day to day. The children she taught would grow up knowing both worlds. They'd speak some of each other's languages, understand each other's customs, see the strengths in both approaches. This generation might never know the fear that haunted their parents. They might build something new from this fragile beginning. The liaison role required constant balancing. Some days she felt stretched thin between competing demands, but she remembered the night she'd stumbled into the clearing, bleeding and alone. She remembered the human who'd chosen mercy over fear. That memory kept her going when the work felt impossible. Two cultures watched her movements, learning from her example. She showed them how to bridge their differences, how to find common ground, how to build trust through action. Her presence made the alliance real in ways treaties never could. She was the living connection, and that connection held strong against all challenges. Liara held out the thermal blanket, the foil material catching the morning light. Her wounds had healed completely, the azure blood no longer staining her side. "I return it not because I don't value it," she said. Her voice held the same musical quality Caleb remembered from that first night. but without the strain of pain now. The blanket lay between them, a silver rectangle that had witnessed everything. The object had served its practical purpose but meant something more now. It wasn't just emergency gear anymore. It carried the memory of that first moment of trust, of blue eyes meeting human ones across a cultural divide. The crinkling sound it made had become familiar, almost comforting. She no longer needed its physical warmth to remember Caleb's compassion. That memory lived in her now, part of her understanding of what humans could be. The gesture of returning it had become part of their shared story. It completed a cycle that began with a desperate act of mercy. She offered it back as acknowledgement that the crisis had passed, that normalcy had returned in some form. But normalcy looked different now. The peace between their peoples had reshaped what normal meant. Caleb shook his head slowly. He didn't reach for the blanket. "Keep it," he said. His voice was quiet but firm. He wanted her to have that reminder of how everything started. That night in the barn seemed both recent and distant, a turning point that already felt like history. "Sometimes the smallest gestures can change worlds," he said. The words hung between them, simple but heavy with meaning. That foil blanket represented more than its material value. It stood for the choice to help when helping meant risk, for the decision to see a person instead of an enemy, for the courage to defy rules that made no sense in the face of suffering. The foil blanket symbolized their entire alliance. It was a human object that had comforted a Na'vi. It had witnessed their first cooperation against the Night Stalkers. It had been present during the fever crisis. Now it would remain with her, a tangible connection between their cultures, something to hold on to when tensions arose, when doubts returned. Simple kindness had sparked extraordinary change. One act of mercy had altered relationships between entire species. The blanket was the physical evidence of that moment. Its metallic surface reflected their faces now, human and Na'vi together in the morning light. The crinkling sound seemed softer now, almost like laughter. The relic of mercy became a living emblem of peace. It would travel with Liara as she worked between settlements. It would remind both peoples what was possible when compassion overrode fear. Children would see it and ask about its meaning. Adults would remember the story of how peace began. Caleb finally reached out, but not to take the blanket. He folded her fingers back around it. The gesture felt familiar now, human hands guiding Na'vi ones, but with mutual understanding instead of uncertainty. She nodded slowly, accepting the responsibility that came with keeping it. The blanket would remain with her, but its meaning belonged to both of them, to both their peoples. It represented the best of what they could be together, protective, compassionate, willing to risk everything for what was right. Sometimes the smallest objects carried the largest meanings. Sometimes simple solutions worked best because they came from the right place. The foil blanket would continue its work, just in different hands now. The future appeared in the settlement's youngest members. Human and Na'vi children stood together in the clearing, practicing hunting signals under Liara's guidance. Their small hands moved through traditional gestures, flat palms for silence, circling motions for gathering, flicking fingers for danger. They mimicked her movements with focused intensity, blue hands and pale ones moving in unison, learning the forest's language together. Their parents watched from the perimeter fence with mixed hope and apprehension. Farmers held tools loosely, their eyes shifting between children and tree line. Na'vi warriors stood equally still, their expressions guarded but curious. The adults carried generations of fear in their posture. Every smile between children made them tense slightly. Every shared laugh felt both promising and dangerous. These children would grow up without the same fears. They saw playmates where their parents saw potential threats. They shared snacks from different worlds, human bread with Na'vi forest berries. They compared toys, tools, stories about their homes. The cultural divide that seemed impossible to cross felt simple to them. They built bridges where their elders saw only walls. They saw allies where previous generations saw enemies. A human boy showed a Na'vi girl how to whittle wood into animal shapes. She showed him how to find water by listening to certain bird calls. They exchanged words from both languages, creating a pidgin dialect of their own. Their interactions held none of the suspicion that haunted the adults. They approached each other with curiosity instead of fear. The parents vowed to co-create something new for them. Council members and clan leaders met regularly now, discussing shared hunts, joint patrols, trading agreements. They built frameworks for the future their children were already living. The work felt fragile, like weaving cloth from broken threads, but they kept at it, driven by the sight of those children playing together without hesitation. This shared future required continued courage from both sides. Not everyone approved of the alliance. Some Na'vi traditionalists still muttered about human weakness. Some settlers still eyed blue skin with suspicion. The peace needed daily reinforcement through actions, not just words. Every interaction carried weight. Every decision mattered. But the foundation had been laid through one act of mercy. Caleb's choice to help a wounded stranger had started everything. That single decision had created ripples that reached these children playing together now. It proved that ordinary actions could have extraordinary consequences. That compassion could reshape relationships between entire species. Worlds converged instead of colliding. The perimeter fence still stood, but its meaning had changed. It marked a boundary now, not a barrier. Human and Na'vi sentries patrolled together along its length. They shared watch schedules, communication protocols, emergency signals. The cleared ground between settlements became meeting space instead of no man's land. The story proved ordinary kindness could alter civilizations. One person helping another had changed everything. The children practicing hunting signals were living proof. They would lead differently than their parents. They would see alliances where others saw divisions. They would build on the foundation of that first act of mercy, carrying it forward into a future none of them could yet imagine. The parents watched their children and saw possibilities they'd never considered. The fear in their eyes began slowly giving way to something else, cautious optimism, tempered by experience but real nonetheless. They started imagining a world where their children might never know the isolation they'd experienced, where the forest held friends as well as dangers, where different didn't have to mean enemy. The perimeter alarm stays silent most nights now. Human and Na'vi sentries walk the fence line together. They share watch schedules and communication protocols. Patrols mix technologies. Night vision scopes with wilderness senses. Children from both peoples play in the cleared area. They practice hunting signals and share stories. Their laughter carries where gunfire might have echoed. The forest feels less hostile now. Sometimes the smallest risk carries the greatest reward. One act of compassion altered two civilizations. The foil blanket remains with Liara, a symbol of that choice. Peace holds because someone chose mercy over fear one dark night.